Good afternoon and welcome to our special offering, Know Your Debt Fund. I'm Sumaira Abdi. Now, over the last many days, there has been a lot of talk on WhatsApp and social media regarding inter-scheme transfers in some select categories of mutual funds. Now, what exactly is an inter-scheme transfer and why does it matter to a retail investor? That's the topic we're going to be delving into today. Joining me is Kirtan Shah, the Chief Financial Planner at SRE. Hi, Kirtan. Good afternoon. Thanks very much for joining in. Now, the first thing I want you to tell our viewers is exactly what do you mean when people say that schemes of mutual funds have undertaken an inter-scheme transfer? What exactly is this phenomenon?
Hi, Sumaira. Thanks for having me. Sumaira, this is a very basic concept where, let's say, for example, in our case that we are discussing, there is a scheme which is credit risk fund who for some reason needs to sell some assets. And then there is a scheme which can be a dynamic asset allocation fund or an aggressive hybrid fund in our case, who is basically looking at moving out of equity and moving more into debt. So there is one scheme which is the credit risk scheme which has a need to sell assets. And then on the other side, there is a scheme within the same fund house, which has a need to buy debt assets. So instead of selling it outside to somebody else, what they do is they transfer it within one scheme to another scheme within the same AMC. That is what you actually call as inter-scheme transactions.
Okay, so basically one scheme of a fund house is selling a security and another scheme buys it. It doesn't reach the open market. This would fall under the, is it a legally mandated way of doing things by SEBI?
Subhaira, absolutely. This is absolutely in the perspective of what AMFI or SEBI allows mutual funds to do and not do. This has been happening for years together. To show some numbers to you, in the year 15-16, there was some roughly 93,000 crore worth of inter-scheme transactions that happened in the entire year. Just the last year, which is 18-19, there were roughly 2,31,000 crore worth of inter-scheme transfers that happened. And last year, 19-20, roughly 1,60,000 crore worth of inter-scheme transactions that happened. This is absolutely in the preview of what SEBI allows. The only caveat here, Sumaira, is SEBI last time around a couple of years back made sure that when one paper gets transferred from one scheme to another scheme, there is no mispricing or mismatch in the valuation. So what SEBI went ahead and did was make sure that any of these inter-scheme transactions that happens, the pricing is set by the credit rating agency. So any AMC before wants to do any inter-scheme transaction, they cannot decide the price. The buying scheme or the selling scheme will not decide the price. The price will actually be given by CRISIL and ICRA. And depending on that price, they will do this transaction within these two schemes in the same fund house.
Okay, so basically an inter-scheme transfer is the buying and selling of securities within different schemes of the same fund house. It doesn't go outside the AMC. Secondly, it is within mandated laws prescribed by SEBI. It has been on the rise. So let's find out now what are the reasons under which inter-scheme transfers are usually done, and then we'll give a context as to why we're picking up this topic today once we've understood the very basics. So Kirtan, what are the conditions under which an AMC would normally want to do an inter-scheme transfer?
So Sumaira, there is actually no definition given out by SEBI as to under what circumstances are you allowed to do an inter-scheme and under what you are not. But generally what happens is all of these AMCs have an internal understanding or an internal rule that they go by with, which is as basic as that you have to make sure that the scheme which is trying to sell has a reason why it wants to sell the credit or the paper. And then there is this another scheme which also should have a reason to buy that particular paper. So if both of these schemes are meeting this internal mandate, where one is saying that there is a reason I want to sell, another is saying that there is a reason I want to buy, then they can go ahead and do inter-scheme transactions. One very important thing over here that has to be noted, Sumaira, is that while there is one scheme which wants to sell and then there is another scheme which wants to buy, one very important thing that they have to take care of, apart from what I just discussed with you, that the valuation has to be given by the rating agency, is that while you sell one paper and you buy the same paper in another scheme, the scheme should have the requirement for the same risk profile. What I mean by that is it should not happen that while you are trying to sell a paper from one of your schemes, the other scheme should not go out of the way to accommodate that paper, whereas the risk or the risk return profile of that scheme does not allow you to do that. So typically, transfer of papers from one scheme to another scheme generally happens not only when there is a need to sell and there is a need to buy, but the need to sell and the need to buy is almost at the same risk level, is where AMCs go ahead and do inter-scheme transactions.
All right, that's fair enough. Okay, so now let's put some context to it. Is that through the last financial year, credit risk funds have been seeing consistent outflows. In fact, in April, we saw outflows over and above 19,000 crores in this category. For the first few days of May, for which I have the data, I think they've done close to about 3,500 crores in terms of a drop in the assets that the category was managing, and is now down to about 31,000 crores in total. Now, the allegation that is being made is that a lot of the schemes to meet these redemptions, they could have either borrowed from banks, but they're choosing to create liquidity by selling off these schemes to certain other funds within the same fund house. Kirtan, if a credit risk fund therefore has to create liquidity to meet redemptions, what are the options that they have, right? You borrow in the banks, but that's a borrowing for which you have to pay. As well, you have paper, because a lot of the inter-scheme transfers that have happened are AA, right? By and large, the large majority. Therefore, is it really something that needs to be questioned as to why they would have chosen A route and not B to create liquidity in that fund? I mean, where exactly does the problem lie?
Okay, so Sumaira, like you rightly pointed out, the category is seen a serious beating over the last couple of months in terms of redemptions. And of course, the entire industry is aware that the redemption is slightly on the higher side. And hence, they were already prepared in terms of a war chest to make sure that they are adequately equipped in terms of liquidity if there is a redemption pressure coming up. So according to me, there are multiple options that a fund would really have if they have to go ahead and, give a redemption. So a lot of these funds will already have existing cash. A lot of these funds will have papers that can be sold in the market to generate cash. Like you rightly said, a lot of these funds can go to the bank and borrow under CBLO or traps. And the fourth is this that we are talking about, which is the inter-scheme transfers. Now, what is happening is, to be fair to the AMCs, a lot of us have been very closely looking at the cash balances, the CBLO and the trap over the last 1 month or so since the time Franklin has happened, right? And everybody, since the Franklin example, has learned that, when you see the CBLO or trap as minus, there is something which is going wrong and you have to be very careful about. Now, this is spreading a lot of negativity across because people only looking at that number cannot make a judgment if everything is good or everything is bad. I think the industry is also playing around with the similar thought process, where I believe what has happened is, because they know that there is a lot of redemption that is going to happen, they are ready and making sure that the war chest in terms of liquidity is made available, where along with the CBLO and the trap liquidity that they are trying to create as borrowings from the bank, they are also making sure that, a larger part of inter-scheme transactions can be done, because it can't be sold in the market at the right price, like the liquidity crisis that you and I spoke about the last time also. So this is just another way of creating liquidity in the system for them to meet redemptions. The only challenge here is, everything goes well with the AMC. This is within the SEBI preview. This is also, the valuation is given by CRISIL and ICRA. So there is no wrong intention in doing this. The only catch that I see to a certain extent in some part of the transfer that has happened is the risk of where and which fund is buying is considered or not. I think that is one area of discussion. If investors understand, they'll be able to make a judgment themselves whether what has happened is good or bad. So the only thing that I see in this entire situation not working out to a certain extent is the buying scheme maintaining the same risk profile of the asset that it is trying to buy? This is one discussion where I feel that there can be a difference of opinion or two judgments around this.
Okay, fair enough. So basically what you're saying is that the interests of unit holders of both schemes, this